Mail-order bride hid bruises beneath her dress. The cowboy's question changed everything. Clara sat on the edge of the train seat, her small suitcase resting by her feet. Outside the window, the landscape was changing fast, her hometown with its familiar streets and quiet houses disappearing behind her, replaced by rolling fields and forests she had never seen. The rhythmic sound of the train wheels on the tracks was almost hypnotic, and she found herself staring out the window for long minutes, trying to imagine the life that awaited her. Her stomach was full of butterflies, but she pushed them down, telling herself that she had made the right decision. She had dreamed about this journey for months. The letters she exchanged with Luke, the man she was supposed to marry, had painted pictures in her mind of a wide-open ranch, endless skies, and a life where she could finally be safe. But beneath that hope there was fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of rejection. And the deepest fear of all, the fear that her past might follow her, that the secrets she carried would be discovered before she had a chance to start over. Clara's hands rested nervously on her lap, hidden under the folds of her long dress. She had chosen it carefully, knowing it would cover the bruises on her arms and shoulders. Every time she moved, she adjusted the sleeves slightly, making sure no one could see the marks of a life she wanted to forget. Those bruises were more than skin deep. They were reminders of the hardships she had endured. She wanted this journey to be about her future, not her past. She wanted to be seen not as a victim, but as a woman ready to take control of her life. The train car was quiet, filled with people traveling for their own reasons, yet Clara felt isolated. She wondered if any of them could see the storm of emotions behind her calm face. Would they notice the hesitation in her eyes, the tension in her shoulders? Or would she simply pass unnoticed, another passenger on a long journey to somewhere unknown? She wasn't sure which thought scared her more, being noticed or being invisible. As the train rolled on, Clara remembered the day she had left home. Her small town had been familiar and safe in some ways, but it had also been a place of quiet pain. She had endured many struggles, some visible, some hidden. She had hidden in plain sight, putting on a brave face for neighbors, friends, and even family. But now, as she left that life behind, she felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness. Leaving meant freedom, but it also meant saying goodbye to what little she had known. The letters from Luke had become her lifeline over the past year. Each one was carefully written, with stories of his ranch, the work he did, and small glimpses into his life. They were honest and simple, yet they carried warmth and kindness. Clara had read them over and over, memorizing every word, imagining what it would be like to stand beside him on the wide-open land he described. She had never met him in person, but she trusted the person behind the letters. Trust was something she had learned to give sparingly, but somehow Luke had earned it. Her thoughts were interrupted by a small noise, a soft clatter from the aisle. A conductor passed by, checking tickets and greeting passengers with a polite smile. Clara returned the smile, though her own was tight and cautious. She didn't want anyone to notice the tension in her body, the nervous energy she could barely contain. She closed her eyes for a moment, imagining the moment she would finally see Luke, imagining him waiting for her at the station. The thought made her heart race, both with excitement and with fear. Clara knew that her life was about to change forever. She had no idea what challenges she might face, no idea what Luke would be like in person, but she was determined to try. Determination had kept her moving forward for so long, and now it would carry her across the miles to a new life. She pictured herself stepping off the train, taking a deep breath of fresh air, and feeling the sun on her face as she began again. It was a vision she clung to, a light at the end of a long, dark tunnel. As the train passed through small towns and open fields, Clara tried to distract herself by observing the people around her. Families laughed quietly together, children pressed their faces to the windows, and travelers read books or dozed in their seats. She felt a pang of longing, wondering if she would ever have the kind of carefree moments they seemed to enjoy. But she quickly shook the thought away. Her life was different now, and she had to focus on the future, not dwell on what she had missed. She pulled a notebook from her bag, the pages filled with her own letters to herself, her thoughts and hopes carefully recorded. Writing had always been her refuge, a way to make sense of the chaos in her mind. Today, she wrote about the journey, about the hope she felt and the fears she carried. She wrote about the life she wanted to build, the freedom she longed for, and the courage it took to leave everything familiar behind. Each word was a small act of bravery, a way to remind herself that she was strong, even when she felt fragile. Hours passed slowly, the train moving through vast fields and forests, over rivers and bridges. The sun climbed higher in the sky, casting warm light across the seats and making the interior of the train feel cozy. Clara watched the changing scenery, marveling at how different the world seemed outside the train compared to the one she had left behind. It was bigger, wider, more open, and it filled her with a sense of possibility. Despite her nerves, Clara allowed herself to imagine the moment she would meet Luke. She pictured his smile, the way he might greet her, the ranch stretching out behind him like a promise of a new beginning. She imagined walking beside him, learning the routines of ranch life, discovering a rhythm and purpose she had never known. The thought gave her a small, hopeful warmth in her chest. It was a feeling she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time, hope without fear, possibility without doubt. Clara's mind drifted again to the bruises she hid beneath her dress. She thought about how carefully she had wrapped herself in layers, how she had learned to move in ways that would not reveal her pain. She remembered the nights of silent tears, the moments when she thought no one would ever notice, and the quiet determination that had kept her moving forward. Now, as she approached this new life, she hoped that these marks of the past would fade into memory, that they would not define her future. As the train began its final approach to the station, Clara felt a mixture of excitement and fear like never before. The moment was almost here, the moment she would step into a world she had only imagined, the world that could finally be hers. She straightened her dress, checked her hair, and took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her past and the promise of her future all at once. She knew that the journey was just beginning, but she also knew that she had the strength to face whatever came next. The train slowed, the familiar sound of brakes filling the car. Clara's heart raced as she grabbed her suitcase and prepared to step into a new chapter. Every step she had taken to reach this point, the hardships, the fears, the careful hiding of her pain, had led her here. She was ready, finally ready, to meet the man she had written to for so long and to take her first steps toward a life she could truly call her own. When the doors slid open, Clara's breath caught in her throat. The platform was crowded, but she scanned the faces until she saw him. Luke stood there, waiting patiently, his eyes calm and kind. For a moment, she hesitated, unsure if this was real or just another dream. Then, taking a deep breath, she stepped forward, suitcase in hand, ready to face the new life waiting for her. Clara's heart was pounding as she stepped onto the platform, her small suitcase dragging behind her. The air smelled different here, fresher, wider, carrying hints of grass and earth that her small hometown could never offer. She scanned the crowd, eyes searching for the man whose letters had been her lifeline. Her stomach twisted with nerves, a mixture of excitement and fear making her hands tremble slightly. Then she saw him. Luke was standing a short distance away, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed simply in a worn denim shirt and dusty boots. His hat shaded his eyes from the sun, but she could see the calm steadiness in his gaze. He wasn't flashy, and he didn't smile immediately, but there was a quiet kindness about him that reminded her of the warmth in his letters. Clara's breath caught in her throat. This was the man she had imagined for so long. She took a small, hesitant step forward, dragging her suitcase. Luke nodded at her gently and lifted his hand in greeting. His voice, when he spoke, was deep and calm. "You must be Clara." "Yes," she replied softly, her voice barely above a whisper. She felt exposed in a way she hadn't expected, like every secret she carried could be seen in the open air of this unfamiliar place. But she also felt a strange comfort in the way he looked at her. Not judgment, not suspicion, but quiet attention, the kind that made her feel like she could breathe. Luke stepped forward and took her suitcase from her without asking, lifting it with ease. "Come on," he said simply. "We've got a long drive to the ranch." Clara followed him, her steps careful and measured. She glanced around the platform one last time, seeing people saying goodbye, children waving, the hum of trains arriving and departing. It all seemed like a distant world now, one she had left behind for a chance at something new. She tried to push away the memories that haunted her, the bruises, the fear, the nights she had spent crying alone. This was her chance to start over, and she had to believe that things could be different. The drive to the ranch was quiet at first. Luke drove a sturdy old truck, the kind built to last decades, and Clara watched the scenery pass by in slow, rolling waves of green and gold. Fields stretched endlessly on either side, dotted with fences, grazing cows, and occasional barns. It was beautiful, wild in a way that made her heart lift, but it also felt overwhelming. She had never been far from home before, never seen this kind of open space. Every time she looked out the window, she felt a mix of wonder and nervousness, unsure if she belonged in this world of wide skies and dusty roads. Luke spoke occasionally, pointing out landmarks or telling short stories about the ranch. "That hill over there," he said, nodding toward a gentle rise, "used to be my grandfather's favorite spot. He said you could see the whole valley from there." Clara listened quietly, nodding, trying to absorb every word. His voice was steady, grounding, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a small spark of hope that maybe this life could be different. She wanted to ask him questions about the ranch, about the work, about the life he lived, but words seemed to stick in her throat. Instead, she watched him out of the corner of her eye, noticing how his hands rested on the steering wheel, how his eyes scanned the road, alert but calm. There was a confidence about him that didn't feel threatening. It felt protective. And in that moment, Clara realized she had been longing for that kind of presence, someone steady, someone she could trust. Despite her attempts to remain composed, Clara felt the old tension creeping into her shoulders. Every movement was cautious, every gesture deliberate, as if the slightest misstep could reveal her secrets. She wore long sleeves, carefully arranged to hide the faint bruises on her arms. Her hands clutched the edge of her dress from time to time, making sure nothing slipped through. She had spent years learning to hide her pain, to smile and act normal while inside she felt broken. But here, in the presence of this stranger who was supposed to become her husband, the fear was more intense. She didn't know if she could pretend anymore, if she could keep the walls she had built so carefully intact. The truck rumbled on, the sun climbing higher in the sky. Clara finally took a deep breath and let herself relax a little, leaning against the seat. She reminded herself that this journey was about new beginnings, that she had a right to hope, and that she deserved a chance at happiness. Slowly, she allowed herself to imagine life on the ranch, the sound of cows in the distance, the smell of hay and soil, the rhythm of daily chores. She imagined waking up each morning to a wide-open sky, feeling free for the first time in her life. Luke glanced at her once, noticing her quiet gaze and the slight tension in her body. He didn't comment, but his eyes were thoughtful, curious. He had been through a lot of life himself, and he could sense when someone carried invisible burdens. He didn't push, though. He knew better than to force someone to reveal what they weren't ready to share. Instead, he focused on the road, speaking when necessary, leaving space for silence, which he knew could be just as comforting. The truck finally turned off the main road and onto a narrow dirt path. Clara's heart quickened. The ranch was close now, and the thought of stepping into a completely new life made her both nervous and excited. She gripped her dress tightly, feeling the weight of her past pressing down, and yet also a strange exhilaration. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for, the moment she would meet the man who could offer her a fresh start. When they arrived, the ranch stretched out before her, bigger than she had imagined. Rolling fields, a sturdy wooden house, and barns painted in muted reds and browns gave the impression of a place that had endured time and storms. Horses grazed in a nearby field, their coats shining in the sunlight. The air smelled of hay, earth, and animals, and Clara felt a small thrill of excitement. This was real. This was not a dream. She was here. Luke helped her carry her suitcase to the house, opening the door with a quiet familiarity that suggested he had done this routine countless times before. The house was simple but warm, with sunlight streaming through large windows and the faint smell of wood and home. Clara's eyes roamed the space, taking in the small kitchen, the living room with its plain but sturdy furniture, and the staircase leading to the bedrooms. It all felt solid, dependable, a stark contrast to the instability she had left behind. As they settled in, Luke offered her a glass of water. Clara took it gratefully, sitting down at the small wooden table. She tried to focus on the moment, on the simple comfort of being indoors, safe, and out of the public eye for a while. But the nervous energy still buzzed in her chest, a reminder that she was standing at the edge of something new, something uncertain. "You must be tired," Luke said softly. His voice was calm, almost soothing. The journey was long. Clara nodded, unsure if she could speak without betraying her anxiety. "Yes," she whispered, "it was long, but it's good to be here." She hesitated, then added, "The ranch, it's beautiful." Luke smiled faintly. It can be hard work, but it's honest work. And there's a lot of space to think or not think if you prefer. His words carried no judgment, only an offer of understanding. Clara felt a small weight lift from her shoulders. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she could breathe without fear of someone judging her past. They spent the rest of the afternoon walking around the property. Luke showed her the fields, the barns, and the horses, explaining the routines in a calm, matter-of-fact way. Clara listened attentively, asking questions when she could, but mostly observing. Each moment felt like a careful negotiation between hope and fear, between the desire to trust and the instinct to hide. She noticed how Luke moved with ease, how he treated the land with respect, and how his presence carried a quiet assurance that seemed to promise safety. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting golden light across the fields, Clara realized she had made it through the first day without panic, without shame. She had survived the journey, faced the unknown, and taken the first steps into a new life. And for the first time in a long while, she felt the possibility of happiness, not a fleeting daydream, but a real, tangible hope. That night, as she lay in the simple bedroom Luke had shown her, Clara stared at the ceiling and let her mind wander. She thought of the letters, the journey, and the kindness she had glimpsed in Luke's eyes. She thought of the bruises hidden beneath her sleeves and how, maybe one day, she could show them and not feel fear. She thought of the future and realized that for the first time, it seemed like something she could touch, something she could shape. And as sleep finally claimed her, Clara felt a fragile but growing sense of peace. She had taken the first step, and tomorrow she would take another. The next morning, Clara woke to the sound of roosters crowing and the soft rustle of wind through the trees. Sunlight streamed through the window, filling the room with a warm, golden glow. She took a deep breath, feeling both nervous and excited. Today would be her first real day on the ranch. She had spent the previous evening imagining what chores and routines might await her, but nothing could have fully prepared her for the reality. After a quick breakfast of fresh eggs and warm bread that Luke had prepared, she followed him outside. The morning air was crisp, carrying the smell of hay, grass, and animals. Clara's heart beat fast, part of it with anticipation and part with fear. She knew ranch life would be hard work, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for the long hours and physical labor. She had spent much of her life trying to survive quietly, and the thought of being useful in a completely new environment both thrilled and intimidated her. Luke handed her a pair of sturdy gloves and a wide-brimmed hat. "You'll need these," he said simply. "It's hotter out in the fields and the work can be rough. Take your time and don't worry if you don't get it perfect the first time." Clara nodded, taking the items with a grateful smile. His calm, patient tone helped soothe some of the anxiety that had been building in her chest. She felt safe in his presence, even though they had just met. Their first task of the day was feeding the animals. Clara followed Luke to the barn, where cows and horses were already waiting. She felt a pang of nervousness as she approached, worried that she might make a mistake or accidentally scare the animals. But Luke guided her with simple, clear instructions. "Hold the feed like this," he said, demonstrating, "and let them eat slowly. Keep your hands steady." Clara copied his movements, feeling a sense of accomplishment as the animals began to eat without incident. As the morning wore on, Clara realized that ranch work required both strength and patience. Carrying buckets of water, stacking hay bales, and checking fences was exhausting, but it also gave her a strange sense of satisfaction. She had never worked with her hands in this way before, and the tangible results of her efforts, the animals fed, the hay stacked neatly, the fences secured, gave her a sense of purpose she had never experienced. Despite the physical demands, Clara found herself noticing small, beautiful details that made her heart lift. The sunlight hitting the barn roof, the gentle sway of the trees, the soft neighs of the horses, it all felt alive and vibrant. She felt connected to the land in a way she had never felt in her previous life, where fear and worry had always clouded her days. For the first time in a long while, she felt capable of enjoying the present, of noticing beauty and peace without guilt or anxiety. Luke noticed her attention to detail and the care she put into each task. He didn't comment immediately, but he observed quietly, making mental notes about her strengths and her hesitations. He knew that Clara was carrying something heavy, something invisible that could not be fixed with chores or sunlight alone. He sensed her tension, the way she flinched slightly when he moved too close or when the horses nudged her accidentally. He didn't push, though. He knew trust took time, and he was willing to give her as much as she needed. By midday, the sun was high and hot, and they took a short break under the shade of an old oak tree. Clara sat down, wiping sweat from her forehead, her arms tired but her spirit lighter than it had felt in years. She felt a small smile tug at her lips. For the first time in a long while, she had done something without fear holding her back. She had faced the animals, the work, and even herself, and she had survived. Luke sat beside her, handing her a cool glass of water. He didn't ask questions about her past or her hesitation, but simply sat quietly, sharing the moment with her. Clara noticed how easy it was to be near him, how his calm presence made her feel less anxious, less guarded. She realized that for the first time she didn't have to hide all of herself. She could begin to let her walls down, little by little, in the safety of this place and this person. After the break, they moved on to checking fences and repairing any damage. Clara worked alongside Luke, learning quickly how to use the tools and materials. She felt clumsy at first, unsure if she would be able to handle the work, but Luke's quiet guidance helped her gain confidence. He demonstrated each step patiently, repeating instructions without frustration. With every fence post secured and every gate repaired, Clara felt a growing sense of pride. For the first time, she felt competent in her own body, capable of contributing to a life that was hers to shape. As the afternoon sun began to dip lower in the sky, Clara noticed something she hadn't expected. She was smiling, truly smiling, without fear or hesitation. The past still lingered in the back of her mind, but it didn't dominate her thoughts. She felt a sense of freedom, a small but powerful victory over the shadows that had followed her for so long. The ranch, the work, and Luke's quiet support were helping her heal, even if she didn't fully realize it yet. Yet despite her growing confidence, Clara couldn't ignore the lingering fear within her. Every time Luke reached out to assist her or even touch her arm lightly, she flinched slightly. It was a reflex she had developed over years of pain, and it reminded her that healing would take time. She felt a twinge of frustration at herself for reacting this way, but she also knew that it was natural. Trust wasn't something that could be forced. It had to be earned, and she was beginning to see that Luke might be the person capable of earning it. As the day drew to a close, they walked back to the house together, their steps slower now as fatigue set in. Clara's muscles ached pleasantly, and she felt a strange satisfaction in the exhaustion. For the first time, she felt that her body and mind were aligned in purpose, that she could take pride in the work she had done and the progress she had made. She also realized that she was beginning to see Luke not just as a man she had corresponded with, but as someone she could respect, rely on, and perhaps even trust. That evening, after a simple dinner, Clara found herself sitting quietly on the porch, watching the sun set behind the hills. The sky was painted with deep shades of orange, pink, and purple, and the air carried the cool scent of evening. She thought about the day, the work, the small victories, the moments of connection with Luke, and felt a fragile but growing sense of hope. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a future that wasn't ruled by fear, a life that could be filled with trust, purpose, and even happiness. Luke joined her on the porch, carrying a small lantern that cast a warm glow over the wooden railing. He didn't speak at first, simply sitting beside her, sharing the quiet of the evening. After a while, he said softly, "You did well today. You're stronger than you realize." Clara looked at him, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the lantern. His words weren't praise in a showy sense. They were acknowledgement, recognition of her courage and resilience. For the first time, she felt seen, not for what she had endured, but for who she was becoming. Clara's hands rested on her lap, and she let herself relax for a moment, letting go of the tension she had carried all day. She realized that the bruises hidden beneath her sleeves didn't define her. They were part of her past, yes, but they weren't her future. Here on this ranch, with this man who treated her with patience and respect, she could begin to heal. She could begin to believe that life could be gentle, that she could feel safe and strong at the same time. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Clara thought about the journey she had taken, the train ride, leaving home, the long hours of waiting and hoping, and she felt a quiet pride. She had taken a step into the unknown, and she had survived. She had faced both fear and hope in equal measure, and she had come out on the other side with a sense of possibility. That night, as she prepared for bed, Clara allowed herself one small act of courage. She loosened the sleeves of her dress slightly, letting the fabric fall more naturally without obsessively covering every mark. It was a small gesture, but it felt significant. For the first time, she felt that she could be herself, that she could begin to exist in this new world without fear of being judged or harmed. Lying in the quiet of the simple bedroom, Clara felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. The day had been exhausting, but it had also been transformative. She had worked, learned, observed, and felt. She had taken the first steps toward trust, toward connection, toward healing. And as she drifted into sleep, she allowed herself to hope. Hope that tomorrow would bring more progress, more understanding, more moments that would help her shed the weight of her past and embrace the life she had always longed for. The next morning, Clara woke with a quiet determination she hadn't felt in years. The chores and routines of the ranch were becoming familiar, almost comforting. She moved through the kitchen with careful efficiency, preparing breakfast and tidying up, feeling a sense of pride in being useful. Yet beneath the calm surface, a storm of emotions churned. She knew she couldn't keep hiding everything forever. The bruises, the fear, the memories of pain, they were part of her, and she was beginning to feel the pull to let them out into the light. Luke was already up, tending to the animals before the heat of the day became too strong. Clara watched him through the window, admiring the steadiness of his movements, the quiet authority he carried without arrogance. There was something comforting in the way he approached the work, a sense of connection to the land that spoke of reliability and strength. She felt a pang of admiration and a deeper emotion she wasn't ready to name. Trust was growing slowly between them, but it had taken her years to learn how to trust at all. After breakfast, Luke suggested they sit outside for a moment of rest. The morning sun had warmed the air, and the gentle breeze carried the scent of grass and hay. Clara felt a moment of courage rise within her. Today, she decided she would speak, not about the ordinary things of the day, but about the weight she had carried in silence for far too long. She was terrified, but she also knew that holding everything inside was no longer sustainable. "Luke," she began hesitantly, her voice small but determined, "can I ask you something?" He turned to her, his expression open and calm. "Of course," he said softly. His patience had always been part of his strength, and it gave her the courage to continue. Clara took a deep breath, feeling her hands tremble slightly. Do you trust me?" The question sounded fragile even to her own ears. She wasn't asking about the ranch or the chores or even their growing friendship. She was asking about her deepest fear, that someone could see her, know her, and not reject her. Luke's gaze softened, and for a moment he said nothing. Then he answered simply, "I do. I trust you, and I hope you can trust me too." His words were steady, filled with an understanding she hadn't expected. It was as if he could feel the weight she carried, even without her having to explain. Clara's throat tightened and tears pricked her eyes. She had spent so long hiding, so long fearing judgment, that it was almost unbelievable to hear acceptance and patience instead. Slowly, carefully, she began to speak. She told him about the bruises she had hidden beneath her sleeves, about the fear that had dominated her life, about the pain she had endured and the nights she had spent crying alone. Her voice shook at first, but with every word it grew steadier, more certain. She realized that the act of speaking was itself a kind of release, a way to unburden herself without shame. Luke listened in silence, his eyes never leaving hers. There was no shock, no anger, no impatience, only steady attention, a kind of understanding that she had never encountered before. When she finished, there was a long pause. Clara braced herself, expecting questions, judgment, anything. But Luke simply reached out and took her hand gently. "Thank you for telling me," he said quietly. "I'm honored that you trusted me enough to share this. You don't have to carry this alone anymore. Not here, not with me." Clara felt a wave of relief wash over her. For the first time, she realized that someone believed her, not because they had to, but because they wanted to, because they chose to. She had spent so long feeling invisible, but in this moment she was seen, truly seen. The sun continued to rise higher in the sky, casting warm light across the fields and their small seating area. Clara felt tears slipping down her cheeks, but they weren't just tears of sorrow. They were tears of release, of hope, of a long-suppressed joy beginning to stir. She had taken a step she never thought she could, and it had been met with kindness instead of fear. Luke didn't pull away or offer empty comfort. He stayed with her, silent but present, letting her process everything in her own time. He knew that healing wasn't about rushing or fixing. It was about patience, about creating a space where trust could grow naturally. And in that quiet, supportive presence, Clara felt a small but powerful sense of safety she had never known. After a while, she wiped her eyes and looked at him, her voice steadier now. "I don't want to live in fear anymore," she said. I want to try to be strong, to be free, but I didn't know how until now." Luke nodded. "You already are strong," he said gently. "You've survived everything that came before, and now you're choosing to take control of your life. That's strength. That's courage." His words carried a weight that grounded her, made her feel the possibility of a future where fear didn't dominate every moment. For the rest of the morning, they worked together in a quiet rhythm. Clara noticed how different it felt to move without constant tension, without hiding every flinch and hesitation. She still had scars, both visible and invisible, but she realized that she didn't have to hide them forever. Luke's quiet support allowed her to begin imagining a life where she could be open, where she could heal at her own pace. As the afternoon sun climbed high, Clara felt an unfamiliar lightness. The chores were still hard, the work still demanding, but it felt less daunting. She felt seen, supported, and most importantly, capable. She began to speak more freely with Luke, asking questions about the ranch, about the routines, about life in this vast, open land. And Luke answered patiently, sharing stories and simple lessons, never pushing, never judging. By evening, they were both tired but satisfied. The sky blazed with shades of orange and pink as the sun dipped behind the hills. Clara stood at the edge of the fields, watching the colors shift, and felt a profound sense of peace. The past was still there, yes, but it was no longer a chain around her. She could begin to move forward, to embrace the life she had fought so hard to reach. Luke joined her quietly, standing beside her without saying a word. The silence was comforting, filled with unspoken understanding. Clara realized that trust wasn't about grand gestures. It was about these small moments, the quiet presence of someone who chose to stay, who chose to listen, who chose to believe. She felt her heart begin to open in a way it hadn't in years. That night, after a simple dinner, Clara sat by the window in her room, the moon casting soft light across the floor. She thought about the day, about the courage it had taken to speak, about the relief she felt at being believed. She realized that she didn't have to pretend anymore, that she could begin to let the world see the real her. And for the first time in a long while, she felt hope, real hope. Before sleep claimed her, she carefully loosened the sleeves of her dress. It was a small act, almost symbolic, but it made her feel free. Free from hiding, free from fear, free from the weight of secrets she no longer needed to carry alone. She knew the road ahead would not be easy, that healing would take time, patience, and courage. But she also knew that she no longer had to face it alone. As Clara drifted into sleep, her thoughts were quiet, focused on the possibility of tomorrow. She imagined waking up, working on the ranch, laughing at small moments, and continuing to build trust with Luke. She imagined a life where the bruises of her past would no longer define her, where she could embrace strength and kindness in equal measure. And for the first time, she believed that such a life was not just a dream. It was real, and it was waiting for her. The following morning, Clara woke with a lightness she hadn't felt in years. The bruises and fear from her past still lingered in memory, but they no longer held the power to control her. For the first time, she felt a sense of quiet confidence and possibility. The ranch had become more than a place of work. It was beginning to feel like a home, a place where she could finally breathe without fear. Luke was already outside, checking the fences and feeding the animals. Clara watched him through the window for a moment, admiring the steady way he moved, the calmness in his gestures, and the quiet focus that made everything seem manageable. She felt a warmth in her chest, a small smile tugging at her lips. For months, she had dreamed of freedom, of safety, of a place to start over, and now she realized that she had it. Not just the land, not just the chores, but the deeper gift, someone who would stand beside her, patient and kind. After breakfast, Clara joined him in the fields. The sunlight was warm but gentle, and the air carried the scent of grass, earth, and animals. She worked with a new energy, moving with purpose and care. Each task completed, feeding the horses, stacking hay, repairing fences, felt like a small victory, a symbol of her ability to shape a life that was hers. The work was still hard, but it was honest, tangible, and grounding. For the first time, she felt a connection not just to the land, but to herself. Luke observed her quietly, noting the confidence growing in her movements, the way she carried herself with a mixture of strength and grace. He didn't comment unnecessarily, because he understood that Clara was learning in her own way and at her own pace. There was no rush, no judgment, only steady guidance and an open heart. He could see the transformation happening slowly but unmistakably, and it filled him with quiet satisfaction. By midday, they paused under the shade of an old oak tree. The breeze was cool, and the distant sound of the animals created a peaceful rhythm. Clara sat with her hands folded in her lap, feeling a sense of contentment she had never known before. She realized that trust, once such a fragile and terrifying thing, could grow slowly, nurtured by patience, kindness, and honesty. And in that realization, she felt a freedom she had never experienced in her previous life, a freedom not just from fear, but from hiding. "Clara," Luke said after a while, his voice gentle, "you've come a long way. I can see how much stronger you've become." Clara looked at him, a soft blush rising to her cheeks. "I feel different," she admitted. "I still have fears, but they don't feel as heavy anymore, and I don't feel alone, not like I used to." Luke nodded. "That's good. You shouldn't have to carry the weight of the past alone." "And you don't have to, not anymore." His words weren't just reassurance. They were a promise, a reminder that she had someone beside her who would stand by her, no matter how difficult the road ahead might be. For the rest of the afternoon, they worked together on small projects around the ranch, repairing fences, cleaning out the barn, and tending to the fields. Clara felt a growing sense of pride in her efforts. The work was honest and real, and it gave her a tangible sense of achievement. With each completed task, she felt a bit lighter, a bit freer, as though the weight of her past was slowly lifting. As the sun began to dip behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Clara paused to catch her breath. She leaned against a fence post, taking in the beauty around her, the rolling fields, the grazing animals, the quiet strength of the land. For the first time, she felt a deep sense of belonging, not just in a place, but in life itself. The fears and shadows of the past were still there, but they no longer defined her. She was more than what she had endured. She was strong, capable, and ready to embrace the life she had earned. Luke joined her, standing beside her silently for a moment, letting the peacefulness of the evening wash over them. Then he spoke softly. "You're doing well, Clara, more than well. You're building something good here, something lasting, and I think you're beginning to believe it too." Clara turned to him, her eyes reflecting the warm colors of the sunset. "I am," she said quietly. "I think I finally am." The words felt strange yet freeing. For so long, hope had been fragile, almost forbidden, but now it felt real, tangible, within reach. She allowed herself a small smile, one that wasn't forced or cautious, but genuine, a smile that reflected the transformation happening inside her. The evening continued quietly. They returned to the house, preparing a simple meal together. Clara moved with a sense of ease, laughing softly at small moments, feeling a lightness in her chest she hadn't felt in years. Luke's presence was steady, supportive, never overbearing. He offered guidance when needed, but mostly he allowed Clara to take the lead, trusting her instincts and respecting her pace. It was a partnership that felt natural and comforting, a balance of care and freedom that Clara had never known. After dinner, they sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge one by one in the deepening sky. The ranch was quiet now, the animals settled, the fields bathed in moonlight. Clara felt a profound sense of peace. The journey she had taken, the train ride, leaving home, the fear, the silence, the careful hiding, had led her to this moment. And in that moment she realized that the past, while part of her, did not control her anymore. Luke reached out and gently took her hand. Clara felt the warmth of his touch, steady and reassuring. "You've grown so much," he said softly. "Not just in strength, but in heart. I'm proud of you." Clara's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of joy, not sorrow. "Thank you," she whispered. "For seeing me, for letting me feel safe, for helping me believe in a life I thought I'd never have." Luke squeezed her hand gently, his own eyes reflecting understanding and care. "You earned it," he said, "every bit of it. And you deserve every bit of happiness that comes your way." For a long while they sat together in silence, the stars above shining bright, the gentle sounds of the ranch surrounding them. Clara felt a sense of completion, a quiet certainty that she had found more than just a home, she had found a life she could truly call her own. She had survived, endured, and now she was thriving. In the weeks that followed, Clara continued to grow stronger, more confident, and more at peace. The bruises of the past faded, both physically and emotionally, replaced by resilience, laughter, and a growing sense of self-worth. She learned the rhythms of the ranch, the small details of caring for animals and the land, and she discovered joy in the simplicity and honesty of her daily tasks. Luke remained her steady companion, guiding without controlling, listening without judgment, and supporting without expectation. Their relationship deepened naturally, built on trust, patience, and mutual respect. Clara felt the walls she had built around her heart slowly dissolve, replaced by the warmth of connection and the courage to embrace love. Months passed, and the ranch became more than a place of work. It became a sanctuary. Clara's laughter rang across the fields, her presence bringing a quiet energy to the land. The animals responded to her care, the fields flourished under her attention, and the house was filled with a sense of life and warmth that had been absent for far too long. One evening, as they stood together watching the sun set behind the hills, Clara realized that she had finally found what she had been searching for all along: freedom, safety, trust, and the possibility of happiness. The journey that had begun with fear, uncertainty, and hidden pain had led her to a life filled with hope, purpose, and love. And in that moment, she knew, truly knew, that she had transformed. She was no longer the girl who had hidden beneath long sleeves, afraid of the world. She was a woman who had survived, who had healed, and who had embraced life fully, ready for whatever the future might bring. The ranch was her home. Luke was her partner. And Clara had finally discovered the life she had always longed for, a life filled with strength, trust, and the quiet, enduring joy of a heart made whole.